constitutionally a religious pluralism, and it is therefore a moral pluralism. And thus, although I may as an individual speak to others about Jesus Christ, I have no constitutional right to legislate that a person must believe in Jesus. Likewise, although I may exhort others to leave certain immoral habits behind, I have no right to legislate the behavioral code of an individual as long as it does not affect others. This is not so that there is no nor true faith, nor because there are no habits which are intrinsically immoral, but simply because we have chosen to create a society founded on the notion of religious freedom, which I definitely believe in a separation of religion and state.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, he goes on. So now some people want to argue that the legal enactment against abortions are similar to the legal enactment of laws governing the private lives of citizens. This is simply not the case. Laws concerning abortion have been made not to change the hearts of men and women, but to protect the unborn child. Analogically, the civil rights which have been enacted, not so much as to make whites love blacks, as to make them accord blacks those rights which are their just due. I really should have had you read this.
Or you should have practiced a few times.
Sorry.
Reading aloud. It's okay, you're doing very fine. I'm sure the audience understands what you're trying to say.
All right, let me just finish this last paragraph. This is a common sense to most of us. We should, for instance, be utterly dumbfounded to hear someone argue that he doesn't believe a black man is human, and therefore the government has no right to legislate law restraining him from shooting blacks. And in the same way, it is just absurd for someone to argue that laws prohibiting the murder of an unborn child should not be legislated because that person does not accept the unborn child as fully human. Okay, now granted that was a little drastic, his last argument.
Yes, and I've heard the slavery argument before, and it's kind of a straw man argument.
Well, but it does make sense because when we look at what we were talking about before, the primary argument used is that the fetus is not fully human. Because once we've established that the fetus is human and fully human, then the fetus is given, the same rights granted to any other humans, because especially the right to life. So it really is pivotal on that one question: when does a fetus become a human, or when is it fully human? And unfortunately, whether the fetus is human or not is a matter of definition and opinion.
What is your opinion?
But see, my opinion is
human life starts at the point of conception?
I don't know. I don't know when human life starts, but I do feel like, okay, this is what I think is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Even our society, we have not decided if a fetus is human or not. So for example, let's say you were driving, you were drunk, and you hit a woman on the street and you killed her. That would be a very sad story. Okay?
It would be shocking because I don't drink, but go ahead.
Okay, you don't drink.
Nor do I even have a car, so I don't drive. So this is quite the hypothetical.
Okay, let's just say some other person.
Let's just say, no, it's good. This is me, David the drunk, driving a car.
Hey,
I hit kill a woman.
You don't drink or drive, really.
Right, I don't.
You're like on the city bus.
I'm on the city bus. The bus driver's drunk. He's out of control.
You're very eco-friendly. Anyways, but if you hit and kill this woman, you would be charged with either, 1 count of manslaughter or murder. But if she was pregnant, you could be charged with 2.
Mm-hmm.
And not 1.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have labeled in term that was a viable life that you took. And let's say even that woman was on her way to go get an abortion, you would still be charged with 2 counts of murder. And so I feel like we as a society have not even decided one way or another. I feel like in this count we're saying that it is a human, and yet at the same time that woman has the right to decide to end that fetus's life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to share one more quote, and hopefully I'll get through this one better. But this one's from Jason Arthur. So he said pro-choice is a good thing.
Who is Jason Arthur? What are his credentials?
He just wrote several. I don't know.
He's just a guy.
He's a guy.
Jason Arthur, the blogger. He probably works at Walmart, but that's fine.
No, it was a whole site about abortion and topics and issues. That was his site.
Okay. So no bias.
No, well.
I was being sarcastic. Go ahead.
Oh, this is fun, as always.
No, I'm ready for the quote.
Okay, this one I didn't know quite how to articulate my thoughts with this topic. And so I found a couple of people who articulated it much better than I did.
That's totally fine.
Well, until I quoted them, and then it didn't sound right.
You butchered their eloquent writing.
I think I've noticed the more emotional I am about a topic, the less I can
You just need to,
articulate it.
Sarah, as we
Which
did in several podcasts ago. Sarah,
relax.
just relax. Deep
Yes, you're
breath in and deep breath out.
trying to put me to sleep.
I'm just trying to get you to relax a little bit. If you slow down, the flow of words will just it'll be easy. It'll be
Okay, thank you.
fluid. Here we go.
All right. So my good friend Jason Arthur,
Your buddy,
my pal,
Walmart checkout buddy.
I liked how he coined it. And he said, "Pro-choice is a good thing to have. Choices are freedom, and without freedom we are nothing. Freedom is the reason for living, yet we are not offering a soon-to-be child any freedom by aborting it. We are taking its freedoms away. In every other instance in the law, killing a human organism is wrong. Even with comatose patients, we are not killing them but unplugging their life support to see if their bodies can support themselves. That is the closest the law gets to allowing one person to cause another's death without it being considered murder. But when you abort a fetus, you are crushing its body into pulp and burning it beyond a state that it can continue to develop with saline and then tearing it out of its womb and throwing it away." Which I know, okay, I know that kind of sounds harsh, but it's the truth. And when you really think about what you're doing, if you're going to make a hard decision, you have to know what you are doing. And I think a lot of times when we talk about we're allowing nature to take its course, and with abortion, you're not allowing nature to take its course. You're intervening and making a step that ends its life. And I feel like that's where I
But
feel like
then
we
isn't
really,
taking cancer medications like chemo, isn't that intervening with nature? Nature gave you cancer. We're trying to stop that. We're preventing nature from doing its job.
are you saying
No, I'm just saying if you want to get technical
like
about intervening with nature's process.
no, but I'm saying it's the same thing like unplugging a person who is we don't kill that like we're unhooking them from device and allowing them to take their course. And I feel like
But
with
any sort of
abortion,
science or medicine is intervening with nature. What we're doing with when we develop drugs is we're extending life,
yes,
right? Beyond what would normally happen in the life stages.
yes,
So isn't that an intervention of nature?
I guess yes.
So we
By
can
that term,
we're
it would
allowed to
be.
intervene with nature when it's positive.
Well, this is why I don't necessarily agree with the full extent that people go to when at the end of life when people just fight death. And
What about unused IVF embryos?
that is something that I have thought a lot about.
Okay.
And I feel like that is a personal decision that each person would have to make. I don't know. I personally don't believe that a little, couple cell, maybe 100 cell organism has life,
Okay.
but it does have the potential for life. I just feel like it needs to be a very serious. Okay, you asked if I would make abortion illegal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would, but I would make it very much more difficult, I think. And there would be certain situations and criteria that would be needed.
A lot of the I personally feel like a lot of the abortions that occur could be prevented. A lot of the pregnancies could be prevented
Yes.
if religious doctrine were not allowed to rule. Part of the reason why you have so many unwanted pregnancies is because the church strictly prohibits the use of any contraceptives. Regardless, we know your stance on premarital sex, but people are going to have sex regardless.
Yes.
Teenagers and young adults alike.
And
Because of religious practices,
so that they're
there
choosing.
a lot of but no, a lot of because teenagers don't have access to condoms and birth control because their
Yes,
parents feel
they
like it's
do.
a lot of them don't.
They can go to any school nurse.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I didn't have a school nurse at my high school.
I had a school nurse at my high school.
I'm saying I didn't, so not every student does. Not every teenager has access to contraceptives, either because it's just inaccessible or because they're afraid to ask, because they don't want to get in trouble. So you do end up with unwanted pregnancies. And if we talked about it in an open and frank matter about
Yes,
sex and being responsible and practicing safe sex, you would have far fewer unwanted pregnancies, which would lead to far fewer abortions.
no, I definitely agree. There needs to be more education. There needs to be more dialogue. I mean, there's even the morning after pill,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't feel like that is a very bad idea.
But wouldn't that? I mean, that's it's taking place basically after the point of contraception.
Well, I think though how it works
I
is
mean,
I don't
you're assuming that there's
no, but it's the
you,
day after, like
but right, but why? But it's the intent. Why are you taking it?
because you think you possibly could have gotten pregnant.
Exactly, because you
You're
think
not
there
going to
might.
actually conception doesn't happen until a few days after sex. It takes the little guys a few days to swim up the
Right, but
fallopian
as you
tube.
said, there's the potential for life.
See, oh, but then if we're gonna, okay, then a girl and a guy shouldn't sit next to each other. There's a potential
Exactly. No,
line.
that's exactly my point. It
Where's the
becomes no, no, no.
line?
It becomes an endless loop. It becomes an
Okay,
absurd
I think
argument.
I think the line is when two people have sex. I think that's it. I think that's a good way to approach it.
We should just not have sex. Period.
No, I'm saying that is the point. Oh,
What if this law? What if this law there was an equivalent law against men? Do you think it would?
an equivalent law against men? I'm like, what? What do you mean?
Let's say if there was some sort of equivalent law you can make for men, an abortion law. I mean, abortion is clearly just for women, guys, because men cannot conceive. We can't get pregnant. If there was a law that strictly forbade men from doing something similar to their bodies, do you think it would go over well? I'm just saying, if you look at the
That's
history of
no, that's actually a really interesting.
lawmaking of men typically having the power, and I don't want to sound sexist, but I'm
No,
just
that's
stating the facts. Do you think that would go over well? Do you think we'd be even having a discussion?
no, actually, that's a really interesting topic, and I think it would be a different story. Yes,
Exactly. Yes.
I do think. But I mean, I am a woman, and I definitely do feel like a woman has a right and a responsibility, over her body. However, I also feel like once you make a certain decision, you accept the consequences of that decision. And we live in a society where people do not accept the consequences.
What if
We are,
what if a
yeah,
condom breaks during sex?
then I'd probably use the morning after pill.
I'm just saying there are people
Yes,
who are prepared for consequences and are taking preventative measures, but beyond their control, it still happens
yes,
anyway.
but the majority of people,
Right, I'm saying, but there are always exceptions.
I know there are always exceptions. Oh, what another shade of gray.
Hmm. Yeah, but
Oh,
I'm on
look
the
at it.
side of pro-choice, so
See, and
you're you're pro-life with a butt, basically.
no, I am pro-life, but I'm also pro-education, and I feel like I really wish we didn't even have to have this debate. I wish that people would more seriously consider their responsibility as a human being. And I think no matter what your opinion is, if you're pro-choice or if you're pro-life, it is not an easy decision to make. And I feel like there needs to be more dialogue, there needs to be more education, there needs to be more responsibility. I think the decision to have an abortion should not just be the decision that it's an unplanned pregnancy, it doesn't fit into my life at this time. I think there needs to be a serious reason for why that abortion is being considered. And that's where I can see sometimes it might be more understandable, but in my eyes, I would never, like I mentioned, even if my health was at risk and I was pregnant, I think I would, I don't know if I would abort the baby.
But
Um,
what about circumstances where you say have an unwed teenage girl who gets pregnant, and at some point there's a huge financial burden to the taxpayers
yes.
because look, an abortion is I don't know $500 or $600, but
Yes.
if you want that teen to have a baby, a teenager who maybe doesn't have a job, who has to go on welfare to raise this child, is
Hmm.
sucking tax dollars out of our economy. Now,
I
just taking the whole life argument out of it, just from a purely political and socioeconomic argument, it is far more cost effective to taxpayers to allow abortions to be sanctioned rather than having this child on welfare.
I agree with you.
Okay.
No, that totally makes sense because the majority of these abortions, if these women had been forced to have the baby, they probably a lot of them would be in situations where they would have needed assistance. The
Yes.
child would not have been well taken care of. They probably would not have grown up to be contributing to society.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, I think in that perspective, abortion probably helps our society a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but once again,
But once again,
where's the line? I mean, if if we're just looking at who contributes to our society, we have a lot of people to get rid of.
But we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
We're just talking about
I know.
pro-choice versus